Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of our portrait drawing tutorial, schematic portrait. If you haven't watched part 1, you obviously should do that first so that you can be at the same place and continue on with the drawing. We are moving on to the mouth. I've got a mark for the bottom of the nose and a mark for the chin. If you go halfway between and just a touch up from there, a little higher than halfway, that's going to be the seam where the lips open. I'm going to put a little scoop there that's like itty bitty baby smile. That's actually the little ball that's on the end of the lip. Before I go further, I'm going to plan out how wide the lips will go. And I'll use the eyes again as a guideline. This time I'm going to use the very center of the eye and go straight down and make a mark. And I'll do that on both sides. And that will be how wide the lips are. So I can go ahead and from this little baby smile I made, I'm going to curve back down and then up again. It's not exactly a straight line, but it's not real steep and curve either. This is the seam where we would open our mouth. We're going to repeat that same contour just a little bit above, but we're just going to pinch into the corner of the lip there at the edge for the top lip line. But we don't want this to really be a line. Like this line here we made, you can make that fairly dark and confident because there actually is a seam between your lips. But there's not a seam between your lip and your skin. There's just a value difference as you go from like maybe pinkerish to not so pink. So we just want that to be a value transition and not an outline. To put it another way, if you were to take a permanent marker and outline your lips and have like a black line separating, you'd look awfully strange, and you don't want your portrait to look strange in the same way. For the bottom lip, this is kind of easy. You just kind of go down and then flatten out across the bottom and go back up. You don't want to be all the way at the corner. You want to be a little bit in before that bottom lip line goes across. And again, you want that to be a really light line because it's not really a line, it's just an edge between two values, the lip and the skin around it. Next, we're going to shade this. Now, typically, the top lip looks darker than the bottom lip, and that's because usually you're going to have an overhead light, and this lip kind of creates a shelf that blocks the light right above the seam. It's not going to be as dark as that line you made for the seam, but it's definitely going to give you this volume here on the top lip. And then, you know, as you move up, you can get a little lighter, but you still want it to be kind of a dark shape. And then the bottom lip's going to catch more light because it kind of sticks out and catches the light on it. But the outsides of the bottom lip are going to be darker than the inside. So if we go through with this shade along the bottom, and then we kind of do a little bit near the seam, and we get a little darker at the very outside, and then blend and soften that out, we should have a pretty rounded looking lip. And it is okay if this smudge goes onto the skin around the lips, because again, we don't really want much skin that's like as white as the highlight in the white of the eye. I want to create some volume, some shading around this, because this lip, the upper lip, actually comes up and down and curves a lot more than you're thinking of when you're drawing a portrait from the front. And if you touch your own upper lip and then follow it back, you'll see that it's following that half cylinder that your teeth are doing, where your back teeth are way back here in your face, and your front teeth are much higher. So we accomplish that by sort of shading out this way more so, letting this center area catch a little more light. And then we're going to create that little scoop or divot in the middle there. That's called the philtrum for you anatomy people. It just gets a little darker in there. And then also, because the light often comes from more of an overhead source, if we darken under the nose just a little bit, like the nose is casting a shadow onto the upper lip, that's going to help our volume a little bit more too. I'm going to use an eraser. I'm going to grab my skinny one actually, and just right above the top lip, see if I can get just a little bit of a shine edge. And I'm just going to sharpen up the top lip shadow a little bit more to help that show up. It's subtle, but there's a lot of times I mean, we talked about not wanting a Sharpie outline on those lips, but in some cases you have almost a white edge transition line, and that's more from the direction change, the really quick direction change from coming down to tucking under in that lip. We don't really want a line here. We do want a little bit of a transition from the cheek. The line can show up if you really you smile, but when you're relaxed, there's definitely a transition there. And some people do have a line a little bit here, but we want this to be more of a transition from cheek. And the under part of the cheek is going to be a little darker than the upper part of the cheek, but it's still lighter than the outside of the head as we kind of do this part. I'm going to do that on the other side as well. And I'm going to sharpen up the line dividing the two lips. There aren't very many true lines on the face, but that's definitely one. Most everything is happening through subtle shading changes, elevation changes. This chin is going to be, I'm kind of thinking about directly under the lip, you're going to have a shadow because it kind of dips in before the chin sticks out. And then finding the shape under the chin, and if you need to give yourself a little bit of up or down wiggle room, like you're looking at the drawing as a whole, and you're like, yeah, my chin's a little too short or long, I actually just added a tiny bit because that's what I felt like I needed. Go ahead and do that to find the chin shape that you need. And we've purposefully left these outline lines light and vague. And so it's almost like a floating head, like you can't really tell where the edge is. We're going to decide where those edges are going next right now. And what tends to happen here is that the temple is the side of your head right next to your eye here. That's going to be a little bit flat, more flat and in. And then you're going to get a cheekbone that bulges out just a touch. So this is kind of flat, this kind of cheeks out. And then we're going to shallowly come towards the chin. There's going to be a big transition point that happens at the jaw. The jaw lines up with the mouth seam here. So when I get to that point, I don't want it to be a pointy change, but I do want the direction change to be pretty striking there. Some people have harsher jaw lines than others. If you've got a softer jawline, just kind of let it scoop a little more before you come in. And do what feels right for the character that you're drawing, just as long as you know that the angle here changes to the angle there, even with the lips. We're going to do that on the other side, same thing. Flat line, temple, cheekbone, jawline. Just really trying to think about what's going to look right proportionally. If something feels weird, make an adjustment. Don't just leave it there.
Alright, I'm feeling alright about that.
I'm not going to draw this this top part of the head here yet. I am going to shade the chin a little bit darker towards the outside because that's going back in space as well. And maybe a little bit more towards the bottom, but not really going too much there. And I want that transition to look like, you know, there's actually a ball-ish shape there. So I want it to be fairly smooth, not too harsh of a shading transition there. To make the neck, we're going to use the eyes as a measurement again. We did the inside of the eye for the edge of the nose, the middle of the eye for the edge of the mouth. We're going to do the outside of the eye, come straight down, and that is where the neck approximately should come out below the head. Now, it doesn't matter how skinny you are, you're not going to have a neck that's like much in from that, if any. It's going to be pretty much lining up with these two, the outside. And you can have a neck that's a little wider. Usually that's like if you're like a lineman, a football lineman, or a pro wrestler, and you've got like these giant muscles kind of coming up, your neck might come out a little bit more like that. It's never going to be wider than the whole head, obviously, but sometimes it gets pretty close. Almost everyone, though, has it just about there. So that's what we're going to do for this drawing. We're not going to make the neck very long before we stop the neck. When I look at myself in the video, there's just a little peaking amount of neck before my shirt collar starts. And so I'm going to plan for that. And my shirt collar is going to wrap up and around. This is a t-shirt collar. If you were planning a different kind of collar, like a V-neck or something, you can kind of make the neck V. But this isn't about shirts, so we don't need to get too much into that. We do need, though, to make sure that the shoulders start higher up than where the bottom of the neck is, and that they kind of slope gradually down. There's not going to be a lot of space between the side of the neck, like the jaw, the side of the neck, and the shoulder slope. If you make them really low, like down there, it's going to look really weird. We also want to make sure they're not going too steeply downhill where they're like leaving the bottom of the page instead of going off the side of the page. So we're going to plan for that for the shoulders. Sometimes if you're if you're sitting up straight, you've got that going on. If you're like leaning forward, it's even possible for that edge to be like way up over here, because your face comes forward and your shoulders move up. So just keep that in mind. This is typical, though, for decent posture. To shade, under the chin and the outside of the neck is where the dark areas are. And I'm just going to soften out the blend and come across the whole neck so that I don't have any white areas on the neck. Even the lighter areas are going to stay at least somewhat gray. Give it another pass, push the dark shadow area a little darker. Bring my mediums in a little farther. And we could shade the shirt and kind of mess with that. And when you're doing an actual drawing from a photo, you'll find that there are different wrinkles and value changes on your shirt that you're going to want to not just oversimplify. You want that to look pretty good. But for this drawing, I'm just going to draw that second piece of like the collar shape for a t-shirt, and then just sort of smudge over this. Because I don't want it to be a focal point. I just want it to kind of be in the drawing without being the main feature of the drawing. We're going to do the ears next. To do the ears, we need to use the top or the edge of the eyebrow for the top of the ear, the bottom of the nose for the bottom of the ear, laterally. And I'll make those marks on both sides. Eyebrow, bottom of the nose. Initially, this seems like these ears are going to be giant, and if you make them stick way out, they will seem giant. But we're not going to do that because the ears are actually laying flat back along our head, and we see them, they're going to come up from the side and touch that edge, and they're going to stay fairly close to the head and then scoop in for that bottom lobe. And that should give you the actual height, what the ears should do. Now, if you want to kind of check yourself, you can touch the top of your ear and drag it across and find the top and bottom of your ear kind of do that lineup thing, and that I'm not just messing with you and making you draw giant ears for no reason. So I've got the shape in. I'm not going to worry too much about the shading, other than that there's usually sort of a cavern area right about there, and then above that cavern there's a little sort of window right there where the outside sort of lobe, I guess, comes up and in, but then it bumps out and then it goes in, and you might put a little bit of an edge right there, and then take your finger and just push that right back so that it's not a big deal in the drawing. You don't want this to be lighter than what's happening here in the middle, typically. Same thing on the other side, that sort of big caverny dark area, and then this area here. If you're ever drawing from the side and you see more of the ear, then you can really get into those details. But a lot of times with frontal portraits, you don't even see what's going on in the ears, especially if there's, like, you know, hair going on or something like that. It just blocks it right out. But we're putting it in for now, so we kind of know how and where it goes. If you wanted to pull a highlight onto the ear up here or in here, you can, but we don't want it to be a main feature of the drawing. Let's move on to the top of the head. Now, this being the top of the head, the hair doesn't start growing here. The hair actually starts growing at your hairline, which is further down your forehead, where the top of your head is up here. You've got hair and forehead. So what we want to do is figure out what feels right for the forehead space here on the portrait and mark that off. And then I often will use my own finger and feel how my hairline moves as I'm drawing. Some people have the widow's peak where it kind of comes up first. It might be more straight for you, but it's kind of flatter, and then it dives down into the sideburn area, something like this. And this, you know, it's also not something that you want to line really hard. You just want to lightly map it in right now, because depending on the type of hair we make, we might treat that a little differently and not see a line so much or an edge so much. We'll go in front of the ear a little bit for like, you know, that the hair does that. If you've got sideburns, you might even like find that they just kind of continue down. I've got that going on here. But a little bit in front of the ear and then back out. And the edge of the head, actually, we're going to make it a little bit bigger than what we originally mapped, with a little bit, like, not like a dome top, but like a little bit more of a up and over. And I'm going to just give a little bit extra. I did the same on the chin. You want to find what feels right for the top of the head. And it might be that the actual top of my head is a little bit lower, but because my hair is like a little bit poofy, I get that extra height. So if you shaved your head or had really short hair, this is what you would do, but then you'd texture it. Whether that texture is like a bunch of little circles, whether that texture is a bunch of little marks, like we would have done when we were drawing grass back in the days of landscape drawing. It just kind of depends on what texture makes the most sense. Or if it's like, you know, if you've got the Mr. Clean, like perfect bald, you won't even be able to tell where any hairline is happening. But that's kind of the way you'd handle that. And you wouldn't
This edge to be a line.
you'd want the edge, you'd want to know where the edge is, but kind of start drawing your texture at the edge so it's a little bit broken. If you have a ponytail pulled straight back, your hair will also look like this, except for instead of little marks for the hair, you'll make these sweeping lines that'll, go in the direction that you'd pull the hair back. It'll be more or less straight in the front and kind of doing all these directions, but you just have a lot of it. And then you could always like pull your ponytail across, or just like see it a little bit, because it's really hard actually to feel good about a drawing that you made with someone in a ponytail when you can't actually tell it's a ponytail. It just looks like slick back hair. A lot of people have trouble accepting that. So you can kind of do what you want with that. I'm going to get rid of some of this that I've done to make it a little easier to show some of the other things you want to think about for hair. If you have bangs, coming down in front of your hairline, then we're going to totally stop seeing this line, and we're going to think about, okay, where do those bangs start growing and where are they going to? And we're going to kind of build up the texture of the hair that way. And you might completely lose the hairline, or if you've got like, swooped bangs, you'll see part of the hairline and part of it will be obscured. But that's how you want to handle that if you're dealing with bangs that come down anyway. If your hair has some sort of a center part or a side part, you figure out where that part's going to be. I'm going to make a side part here. And then if the hair is growing from the part sideways, you make those marks in that direction. You just really want to think about what's happening with direction with the hair. Is it going up? Is it curving over? Is it a bunch of shorter hairs? Or is it like really long hair that's kind of going to be swooping? Does it start to come in front of the face a little bit? You can decide that. How much poof is there going on here? Sometimes you get a lot more poof than what we've started with. And then you always want these lines to grow in the direction you would comb it. You don't want to work against the hair. You want to work with that. If the hair is straight, you kind of keep working your way down, this way. This is if the hair is longer, you kind of figure that out. But if it's wavy, you do a lot more of these curly shapes. Or if it's like really tight curls, you just kind of build up your textures with curls this way. So you can kind of figure out what you want and how that texture is going to go. I'm not going to get into all the details of like how to draw every specific hairstyle, braids, all of that. But this information I'm giving you should be enough to really help you do a good job on the hair. The other thing you need to know about hair is every hair color, blonde, black, and then everything in between, white even, you're going to have really dark areas. Oftentimes those dark areas are sort of under an edge, or like coming out of a part, or if you've got long hair, typically, and it's coming down through here, typically the space along the neck and in the chin, like it's super dark in there, that creates a big shadow. And then as you move out, it starts to get farther apart and lighter. But you're going to have lots of variation of value, whatever kind of hair color you've got going on. You're going to have some dark sections that might not have any lightness showing through even. And then you'll also have these sections of light, even on dark hair. Like for instance, this sort of curve shape here might catch some strands of light going on, even though the hair where it's not hitting the light is a little bit darker. And so that feels like there's a shine happening on that hair with that light, just by building up the strokes in the darker areas and letting the lighter areas be a little bit less going on. Let's see. If you want, You can add other features to this portrait just for fun or curiosity. You can put glasses on this person, you can give them earrings or trifacial hair, whatever it is. It's just, I've given you the generic blueprints to make a good portrait. One thing I want to do before I end is double check all my shading. I obviously forgot to shade the forehead, and giving some darkness there at each side of the forehead and softening that in is going to help with roundness quite a bit. Double checking if there's any shadow areas that just feel like they would do better darker. Any areas that got just too smudgy that you need to go back in and like refine your edges. But then also, what do we do about this background? Do we leave it bright white? Do we gray it out? Do we make it black? It kind of depends. A lot of times if you've got white hair, it's going to look better if you shade the background behind it, or blonde hair, if you shade the background behind it, because it's going to really make the lightness apparent. You'll get that really really nice contrast there at the edge. If you really want the eyes to be the focal point, the point of highest contrast, the brightest white, the darkest dark, if you've got bright white out here, it's a little bit taking away from it. So even just like a general sense of gray out there will help just the portrait as a drawing look more complete and balanced. So again, go ahead and finish the hair, add any details that you want, and you're going to be posting your schematic portrait to hand in for Brightspace. So make it as good as you can. If you need to go back through and work on specific portions of the video, you have full control. As I said, you can make the speed super fast to listen to it again without it taking so long. You can replay certain areas over and over, slow the video, pause the video, whatever it is you need to make this as good as you can. Alright, I think that you guys are good to go, and I will see you next time.